A to Z Mysteries, Book Number 18, The Runaway Racehorse, by Roy. Chapter 9. Just then, Uncle Warden walked into the barn. He was wearing flip-flops and a bathing suit and carrying a towel. "Coming for a swim?" he asked. "Sure," Dink said. The kids followed Uncle Warden toward the house. "After we swim, let's go get my film," Ruth Rose said quietly. The kids changed and joined Forrest and Uncle Warden in the pool. They played keep-away with a plastic ball. "Still no sign of Sunny and Whirlaway," Forrest said, nodding toward the barn. "I sure hope they didn't have any trouble on the road." "We're going to get my film," Ruth Rose said. "Maybe she'll be here when we get back." "There's a safe bike path on the side of the road," Forrest said. "Have a nice walk." The kids dried off, pulled on their clothes, and headed across the lawn. "I wonder what's taking Sunny so long to get back here?" Dink asked as they hiked down the driveway. "She could have stopped for food," Josh said. He rubbed his belly. A few minutes later, they walked into photo finish. Josh immediately spied a rack of candy, so he bought a bag of M&Ms. Ruth Rose's film was ready. She paid the clerk, and they started walking back to Forrest's, where they could look at the pictures in private. Josh ripped open his candy and began munching one piece at a time. When they got back to Forrest's, the kids headed straight to the barn. Sunny and Whirlaway had still not returned. Ruth Rose opened the packet of pictures and took them out. There were a few of her cat, then the one taken by the chain conductor. The next pictures were of horses in the barn at Saratoga. Then there was one of the horses on the track, but it was blurry. Next was Sunny with Whirlaway and Barney. The last picture was taken at the winner's circle. It showed Dink and Josh with Dancer's head between them. The man in the cowboy hat was standing in the background. He was wearing a leather belt with a big silver buckle. "It's Mr. Bunks, all right," Dink said. The kids studied the picture. Ruth Rose brought it closer to her eyes. "Guys, do you see anything weird about Dancer's forehead?" she asked. "It looks shiny," Dink said, peering closely. "And darker than the rest of his face," Josh observed. "From a distance, you'd never notice," Ruth Rose said. "What could make it look like that?" asked Dink. "Something dark, like shoe polish," Josh said. "Wait a minute," Ruth Rose said. "Josh, let's see that mark on your shirt." Josh leaned in so Dink and Ruth Rose could inspect his collar. "It looks like shoe polish," said Dink. "Yes," Josh said. "Now I remember, Ruth Rose, when you took our picture, I felt Dancer nudge me in the back." "So Dancer made that mark," Ruth Rose said. "But why would anyone want to put shoe polish on a horse?" Dink asked. "I don't know, but I know who could have done it," Ruth Rose said. "Sunny was polishing her boots with black polish right before the race." "But Sunny doesn't have anything to do with Dancer," Josh pointed out. Ruth Rose shuffled through the pictures until she found the one of Sunny and Whirlaway and Barney. She looked at it for a second, then placed it next to the one of Dink and Josh with Dancer. "Wow," Josh said. "The horses look like twins." Dink picked up the picture of Sunny and Barney, except this one has a white mark on his forehead. "The shoe polish could be covering up a white mark on Dancer's forehead," Ruth Rose said. "But why would Sunny or Mr. Bunks or anybody want to cover a white mark on Dancer's forehead? Why would it matter?" Josh asked. Dink thought about that. Then he remembered Sunny's comment after the race, about how she felt like she was riding a different horse. "That's it," Dink said, snapping his fingers. "What's what?" Josh asked. Guys, what if the horse we washed wasn't Runaway? Dink asked. What do you mean? Asked Josh. I mean, what if someone stole Runaway, then brought back a different horse to replace him? Josh and Ruth Rose just stared at Dink. Well, that would explain why he acted so strange, Ruth Rose finally said. And why he blew the race, Josh said. It would also explain the shoe polish, said Dink. Huh? Said Josh. Well, Dink said, why would someone want to steal a fast racehorse like Runaway? To win races, Ruth Rose said. Right, said Dink. And if someone did steal Runaway and enter him in a race, he'd be sure to disguise him somehow. Like covering up the mark on his forehead with shoe polish, said Josh. So that's why Mr. Bunks was there, Ruth Rose said. He must have stolen Runaway and entered him in the race as a dancer. And I'll bet Sunny's working for him, Josh said. It would have been easy for her to switch the horses. Plus, we saw her with shoe polish, Dink said. I'd like to ask Sunny a few questions, Ruth Rose said. Where is Sunny? Josh asked. Good question, said Ruth Rose, looking around the empty barn. She sighed. And if she did switch horses, how can we prove the horse she rode in the race wasn't Runaway? Dink asked. I know a way, Josh said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sugar cube. Forrest said Runaway doesn't like sugar. When Sunny gets back, I'll offer this to Runaway, or whoever it is. If he eats the sugar, we'll know it's not Runaway. Chapter 10. You're a genius, Ruth Rose said. I know, Josh said. Dink glanced around the empty barn. Now all we have to do is wait for Sunny. Ruth Rose stuffed the pictures back into the packet. Well, I, for one, am not waiting around, she said. Come on, let's go check out Mr. Bunks's place again. What are we gonna do when we get there? Josh asked as they hurried up Forrest's driveway. Look for Runaway, Ruth Rose said. Do you still have those sugar cubes? Josh patted his pocket. Yep. The kids cut behind Forrest's barn and headed for the logging road. A few minutes later, they reached Mr. Bunks's house and barn. I don't see that dog anywhere, Josh whispered. And I don't see Mr. Bunks's Chuck, Dink said. Let's check out the barn, Ruth Rose said. The kids slipped into the barn. It was quiet and dim, with a little light coming through the dusty windows. Biscuit's gone, Dink said, stopping in front of her empty stall. Where is she? As if in answer, they heard a horse whinny. Come on, Dink said, heading outside. Behind the barn was an open field with a path leading through the tall weeds. The kids followed the trail and entered a stand of trees. As they reached the far side of the trees, the kids stopped and stared. They were in a clearing in front of a long shed. A horse trailer was partially hidden behind the low building. The kids pulled open the wide shed door and peeked inside. Dink wrinkled his nose at the sharp manure smell. Half of the shed was fenced off with boards. Behind the fence was Biscuit, staring at the newcomers. In a separate stall, next to Biscuit's, was another horse, wearing a halter. The dark horse looked just like Runaway, except that there was no white diamond on this horse's shiny forehead. It's the horse who won, Josh breathed. Is it Runaway? Dink whispered. Josh unwrapped a sugar cube, walked over to the fence, and held out his hand. The dark horse stepped closer for a sniff. Then he snorted and shook his head. He won't take it, Josh exclaimed. He reached out and carefully touched the horse's forehead. When he brought his hand away, his fingers were smeared with something black. Dink took a towel from a nail on the wall. Holding the horse's halter with one hand, he wiped his forehead. More black came off, revealing part of a white diamond shape. Dink felt goosebumps crawl up his back. Sonny did switch horses, he said. This is Whirlaway, Ruth Rose said. She opened her envelope of pictures. She found the one of Sonny and the horse and Barney, and held it up next to the real Whirlaway. The horse back at Forrest's place is his double, she said. We have to tell Forrest, Josh said. Tell him what? A voice said. The kids whirled around. In the shed doorway stood Mr. Bunks and Buster. Mr. Bunks was still wearing the clothes he'd worn in the winner's circle, including the silver belt buckle. Sit, dog, Mr. Bunks said to Buster. The dog sat at his master's side. A low growl came from deep in his throat. So you figured it out, Mr. Bunks said. He nodded at the towel in Dink's hand. Even my boot polish trick. His boot polish trick? Dink thought. Suddenly, Dink realized the truth. Sonny had not been the one to put the boot polish on Whirlaway. It was Mr. Bunks. And it had been Mr. Bunks's belt buckle that made the mark in the mud on the horse they washed. It wasn't Sonny who had stolen Whirlaway. She thought she was riding Whirlaway in the race. Mr. Bunks had done it alone. Dink glanced around the dim shed, looking for another way out. The windows were closed and too high up. Now, if you'll just pass me those pictures, Mr. Bunks said, holding out a hand. The man smiled, but it wasn't the friendly smile he'd shown yesterday. Dink took the photos from Ruth Rose and handed them to Mr. Bunks. We don't need the pictures, Dink said. We know this is Whirlaway and we know you stole him from Mr. Evans. Mr. Bunks laughed. Whirlaway? I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I bought this horse. Can I help it if he just happens to look like Whirlaway? Can I help it if he just happens to run like the wind? He slipped the photos inside his shirt. No one will ever prove I stole this horse from Forrest. We won't have to prove anything, Tinker, a voice said. Not with all these witnesses. Forrest, Uncle Warden, and Sonny walked into the shed. An hour later, everyone sat around Forrest's picnic table eating burgers. How did you guys know where we were? Dink asked. I was coming back just as you were leaving, Sonny said. You had such determined looks on your faces, I decided to tell Forrest. And we reached the shed in time to hear everything, Forrest said. Mr. Bunks is going to jail. Did Mr. Bunks actually think he could get away with this? Ruth Rose said. Forrest nodded. Well, he was lucky to find Whirlaway's double. Even the white face diamonds are the same, he said. I was fooled, but Sonny noticed a difference. Whirlaway is usually so friendly, Sonny said. I got suspicious when the look-alike acted like he didn't know me. On the way home from Saratoga, I stopped at the vet's. He took a blood sample that'll prove the horse I rode isn't Whirlaway. That horse is called Dancer, Forrest said. Bunks switched names, too. Turns out the woman he bought Dancer from didn't treat her horse very well. That's why he was afraid of Sonny. Her voice reminded him of his abusive owner. What will happen to Dancer and the biscuit when Mr. Bunks goes to jail? Ruth Rose asked. Forrest winked. I've arranged to buy them, he said. From now on, Whirlaway won't have to run away to visit his mother. Awesome, Josh said. He picked up his hamburger and took a big bite. As he did, a glob of ketchup squirted out and landed on his clean white t-shirt.